my topic, recasting history. What this is the results of a study of how U.S. history is taught at the University of Texas and Texas A&M. My name is Richard Fonte. I'm not from Bowdoin. But we selected University of Texas and Texas A&M to study. They're not small colleges, so they're not a Bowdoin. They're publicly funded colleges. But we also picked these two institutions because of a unique situation that exists in Texas. Next slide, please. We wanted to look at a question whether or not race, class, and gender topics are dominated the required study of American history at these two universities. So that's unique in and of itself, that something is actually required. We were wondering what was the student experience, whether or not race, class, and gender topics were dominant in the reading assignments assigned to them in American history courses. And were there any differences between Texas A&M and the University of Texas? We were also wondering about the research interests of the faculty members who taught these courses. Next slide, please. The focus were on courses that fulfilled a 1971 legal requirement that students to graduate from a Texas university had to have 2 semesters in American history to graduate. Most of us say, well, that would be an amazing requirement. That would surely be a good thing. So we were interested to see how exactly was this being implemented at the two of the flagship institutions in Texas. We looked at what classes could fulfill those requirements, and they would be the introductory survey course, of which 72% of the faculty in this study actually taught, special topics courses in American history, more on that later, and also Texas history. Of course, this is Texas, and so they did allow an option here of taking Texas history as one of the ways to approach American history. These would all be general education courses that undergraduates would take, and often this would, of course, be the only exposure to American history that students would take unless they became history majors. Next slide, please. Basically, we drew the data for our study from the course syllabi and also faculty vitae. 85 course sections were looked at, and 46 faculty members were included in this study. They were not, therefore, the entire department. They were only the faculty that taught these American history required courses. They also would include both regular faculty, adjunct, or visiting adjunct. So whoever, visiting faculty, whoever happened to teach in the semester that we looked at, which happened to be fall of 2010. We examined 625 reading assignments, which we actually read. We had read by and classified by independent blind reviewer. Next slide, please. We analyzed each of these reading assignments into 11 possible subcategories of American history, as you can see listed there on the slide, ranging from diplomatic international relations down to actually 4 types of social history with gender, racial, ethnic, social class emphasis, and other potentially categories of social history, along with political and religious, etc. And we also looked at every reading assignment, classifying them among these 11 possible categories. Most reading assignments, of course, fell into more than one category. We also looked at the faculty research interests and into these 11 categories. In terms of reading assignments, we obviously felt that these categories all represented appropriate topics. And to get a really comprehensive view of American history, you would need to have a number of selections in a number of these areas. If you wanted to have broad coverage, you would want religious history, you'd want political history, you would want levels of social history also. Next slide, please. These are the results. I think some of you have already read these basic results, but what we found is that in reading assignments and also in faculty research, race, class, and gender topics, so-called RCG, were heavily emphasized. Figure A on your left there basically showed that 78% of the faculty at the University of Texas were high assigners of race, class, and gender. That means more than 50% of the reading assignments that they assigned for that American history course were in the area of either race, class, or gender. The numbers at A&M were 50%. In terms of research interests, 78% of the faculty at University of Texas indicated a research interest in race, class, or gender, and Texas A&M, the number was 64%. Next slide, please. Looking at some variation in the courses, and I'm going to look at the general survey course and the special topics courses in terms of reading assignment topics. In terms of the study, 33 faculty were teaching the general survey course. 55% of the topics, or the reading assignments, 55% of the faculty, I'm sorry, were high assigners of race, class, and gender. When it came to the special topics courses, which I once again will spend more time on in a moment, 89% of the faculty were assigning topics that were in the category of race, class, or gender. Next slide, please. Now, so what's the problem? Since we did say it would be appropriate, of course, to have topics such as that focus on race or gender included in a comprehensive survey course. And in fact, we think it's very appropriate. And there's no way, of course, that you could teach a course on American history before 1865 without a focus on race and slavery. So what's our objection? The objection is that an overemphasis leads to shortchanging of student learning in American history. And essentially, if more than 50% of the topic reading assignments are in the race, class, gender area, fewer topics are covered, such as political history, philosophical or intellectual history, scientific and technological history, diplomatic and military history, all topics that you would assume should be part of a survey course, but they've become shortchanged in terms of the reading assignments. Next slide, please. So what do most students miss reading in survey courses? What we found is that 77% of the National Archives' 100 key milestone documents are not assigned. Okay? Only 5 of 46 actually assigned any of the 100 milestone documents. Rarely assigned were such works as Democracy in America. Amazingly, the second one, Letters from a Birmingham Jail, not assigned. Alien and Sedition Act, not assigned, or rarely assigned, I should say. Federalist Papers, an occasional Federalist 10, but very rare indeed. What we found is, of course, no assumed core, no core of reading assignments in American history. Not discussed, for instance, was the Whig tradition or the classical tradition impacting the American founding documents. No Bernard Bailyn, Gordon Wood, or Pauline Maier in any of these courses. And I saw Paul Ray here in the audience. I'd say, Paul, no Montesquieu or monographs on Montesquieu either. Next slide, please. Among the survey courses, we did find some differences by universities. At the University of Texas, we found most of the textbooks used had high race, class, and gender content, although one faculty member then did combine his high race, class, gender textbook with one low textbook. At A&M, most of the textbooks used actually had low race, class, gender content, and 2 of them actually combined one of the textbooks with a high, which actually was Howard Zinn. In terms of race themes, at University of Texas, 44% of the reading assignments focused on race. At A&M, the number was 29% less. At University of Texas, 4% on military topics. At A&M, 14%. Next slide. What we found particularly troubling and problematic was the use at the University of Texas of what we call special topics courses. These were narrow-focused, limited topics that for sure, by definition, discouraged any comprehensive study of American history. That's the listing that you see there of the topics at the University of Texas: the Black Power movement, Mexican-American women from 1910 to the present, race revolution, the United States and Africa, the history of Mexican Americans in the United States, and Introduction to American Studies, which of course is not even an American history course. Remember, these are supposedly fulfilling the legal requirement in Texas to take 2 American history courses. Now, there's nothing particularly problematic with offering these courses in terms of part of a history department, but the question is, should they be the required part of the required fulfillment? We think these topics are too narrow and limited and do not provide a comprehensive overview to American history that was assumed in the Texas legislation. Next slide, please. What we found at the University of Texas, that they were heavy users of special topics courses. In fact, students were actually encouraged to take these by where they were placed in the class schedule, right, and 35% of all the courses were at the University of Texas. And I think that's what's relevant to people in this room, which may not have this requirement. But what we see, of course, is instead of having survey courses, what in a sense, if you have history courses at all, if it would be part of your requirement, you know, beware if it's just a series of catch-all special topics. What we found, of course, in all these special topics courses is that 100% of all the faculty who taught these special topics courses were high users of race, class, and gender reading assignments, and that all of the UT faculty members who taught these special topics courses had race, class, and gender research interests. In fact, the race, class, gender research interests of the faculty were what was being offered as special topics courses. It was a way for the faculty with those interests to be able to provide a course that could actually fulfill, supposedly, the requirement of American history. Next slide, please. Who taught the American history courses? What did the syllabi, what the syllabi said, and what did the vitae say? Basically, what we found is that 78% of the faculty at the University of Texas had a research interest in race, class, or gender, 64% at Texas A&M. Now, both faculty had that interest, but A&M faculty, there were some differences. They had it more likely to list on their vitae a political or a military history. Next slide, please. What we found, and to no surprise, I'm sure, social history was the predominant research interest of both faculties. And you see there a list of the research interests. And you see at the top, social history with racial and ethnic emphasis. 29 faculty listed that. That's 29 of the 46 faculty in our study. 63%, in other words, of the faculty listed that literally on their own vita of what they thought was important. You see the top 4 were all social history. Interestingly enough, going down, you see scientific and environmental technology, pretty low. But I think most shocking of all, if we're thinking in terms of what these courses are supposedly supposed to do, is provide some foundation in American founding ideas. Literally no faculty member teaching any one of these courses listed on their academic vitae an interest in philosophical or intellectual history. 0. Next slide. We also found, probably also not surprising to anyone in this room, trend toward race, class, and gender research interest among those teaching American history courses. We divided all the faculty into 2 groups that were in our study, the 46. Those who got their PhD after 1990 and those who had received it before in the 70s and 80s. And you can see from the slide there that the greater interest in race, class, and gender are among those who are more frequently receive their PhDs. Next slide, please. One of the questions that we also had is, does this research interest then influence the reading assignments in the survey courses? And the answer actually was, it depends. And A&M actually differed from UT. And actually, the results are kind of distressing in some ways, because what we found at the University of Texas among those who were teaching the survey courses is that both those who have a research interest in race, class, or gender research topics, or those who do not, were both high assigners of race, class, and gender readings. More than 50%, in other words, of their reading assignments of both those who had the research interest in one of these areas and did not were assigning race, class, gender readings. And actually both chose race, class, gender textbooks predominantly. What we see at the University of Texas, which is a frightening thing indeed, is that the institutional climate seems to be so pervasive that whether or not that's your research interest or not, there is that kind of drumbeat that this is the kind of reading assignments that ought to be assigned. Texas A&M, what we found was more of the kind of a correlation kind of situation. If you were a race, class, gender faculty research-oriented individual, you were more likely to be a high assigner of race, class, gender readings, more than 50%. In other words, only if you had an RCG research focus. You are also more likely to pick a race, class, gender textbook if you had that kind of research focus. So why the difference? I think it's a less pervasive race, class, gender faculty environment at A&M, but I think it's kind of a telling situation at UT that both those who have that research interest and don't have that research interest are assigning race, class, gender reading assignments at the University of Texas. Thank you.